Hi, this is Dr. Clarence R. Pearson, Sr., and welcome to My View, a podcast where I offer my professional perspective on today's most pressing geopolitical and socioeconomic issues. Recently, my attention has been drawn to developments in Liberia, where debate has erupted over the President Boakai, referring to Liberians in the diaspora who criticize his government as barking dogs. Here is my view on the matter. Why language must be used in context, the responsibility of national leaders, and dignified language. Since theology is being invoked to defend this statement, let us answer it carefully, biblically, and honestly. Key text Matthew 15:26, NIV. Jesus replied, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." The question is not whether the woman was literally an animal. Of course, she was not. The real question is whether Jesus used a metaphor that placed her, as a Gentile woman, in the category symbolized by dogs. The answer is yes. He did not mean she was biologically a dog, but he did use the image of a dog in a metaphorical sense. That distinction matters. A metaphor does not cancel the force of the comparison. It simply means the comparison is figurative, not literal. So when people ask, did Jesus call the woman a dog? The honest answer is, in figurative language, yes. When they ask, was Jesus saying she was literally a dog? The answer is obviously no. In Matthew 15, the metaphor works like this: children equals Israel, bread equals covenant blessings or healing or messianic ministry, dogs equals Gentiles in terms of redemptive order, not human worth. This is why the conversation must be handled with care. Jesus was not uttering a random insult. He was speaking within the framework of salvation history. His earthly ministry had an order, first to Israel, then the blessings of the gospel would extend outward to the Gentiles. Paul later captures that same order when he says the gospel is to the Jew first and also to the Greek, Romans 1:16. That is a theological sequence, not a denial of Gentile dignity. This is also where the Greek matters. The term used in Matthew 15:26 is often explained as kunarion, meaning a small dog, household dog, or pet, not the harsher term kuon, often associated with scavenging street dogs. That does not remove the metaphor, but it does shape its tone. It suggests that Jesus' language, while still testing and positioning the woman, was not intended as a vulgar public insult. The woman herself understood the image and responded from within it. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Her answer showed that she grasped the order in the metaphor and appealed to mercy within that order. Jesus then commended her faith. In other words, the story ends in inclusion, not humiliation. So, yes, context matters, but context does not erase the metaphor, it explains it. That brings us to Liberia. The problem with invoking Matthew 15 to excuse President Boakai is that the two situations are not the same. Jesus was revealing the order of his messianic mission in a redemptive, theological encounter that ended with healing and commendation. President Boakai, by contrast, was speaking as a democratic head of state about living critics in a contemporary political setting. Those are not equal contexts. One is divine mission language in scripture. The other is presidential rhetoric in a fragile democracy. And in the Liberian context, calling, likening, or rhetorically placing citizens in the category of dogs is degrading. Whether one argues that the statement was proverbial, metaphorical, or parabolic, the public meaning still lands the same way. Critics were cast as barking dogs along the roadside. That is why many people heard it as contempt, not wisdom. This is where some defenders of the president become inconsistent. On the one hand, they say he did not call anyone dogs. On the other hand, they explain at length why the dog metaphor was justified. But one cannot have it both ways. If critics were the subject of the illustration and dogs were the image used to describe them, then he did rhetorically compare those critics to dogs. The only remaining debate is not whether he did it, but whether it was appropriate. That is the real issue, and culturally, this matters even more. Language is never heard in a vacuum. In some Western settings, dogs may carry warmer domestic associations. In Liberia, however, To liken a person to a dog is widely heard as belittling and insulting. So even if the president meant ignore distractions, his chosen image was politically careless at best and demeaning at worst. Public leaders are not judged only by intent. They are judged also by the foreseeable effect of their words on the people hearing them. That is why this defense should not rest on theology alone. It should rest on ethical leadership. A president is not a private citizen speaking loosely among friends. He is a national symbol. His words carry institutional weight. When he describes critics in demeaning imagery, he lowers the tone of democratic life and signals that dissent is irritation rather than participation. That is dangerous in any republic. Even some recent Liberian commentary has described Boakai's reported language as dehumanizing and unworthy of a democratic society, precisely because critics in a democracy are supposed to be engaged, not derided. So let us be plain, President Boakai may not have meant that critics are literally dogs. No serious person is making that argument, but he did use an image in which critics were represented as barking dogs. That is the plain force of the metaphor. In theology, metaphor still means something. In politics, metaphor still wounds. And in Liberia's cultural setting, this was not harmless language. Therefore, the issue is not whether the president spoke literally or figuratively. He spoke figuratively. The issue is that his figure of speech was unbecoming of a president addressing his own citizens. Whichever defense one offers, one fact remains. He rhetorically cast a segment of Liberian citizens, his critics, as dogs. And that is why the public outcry is understandable. My View is a continuing series where I share informed commentary on a wide range of geopolitical and socioeconomic topics. If you found today's discussion helpful, please follow, subscribe, like, and share. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I invite you to explore other My View episodes available online. Until we meet again, goodbye.